this was I don't have enough to do anything with. And so I remember when I started hearing about crypto specifically, like very early on, like I probably heard about it like maybe like 13 years ago, probably the first time. Yeah, I was very early heard about cryptocurrencies about 12, 13 years ago. And I had just come out of the monastery, so I didn't have any money. Like I didn't have anything to invest. And probably in about a year, I probably would have had like 1,000 to invest. In my head, I go, that's not anything. What's that going to do? Yeah. Right? And I think a lot of people have that mindset where they're like, I only have $500. I only have $1,000. Like, what can I do with that? I might as well spend it on whatever it is or I'm going to save it because I need it for a rainy day. What does someone do when they have that mindset, when they're like, I don't have enough? How do you approach that?
So when I was in high school, I really wanted a Ford Mustang, but my dad was like, no, we can't buy a Ford Mustang. I wasn't going to get that car. But this is, again, when stock prices had crashed. And the next best thing, if I couldn't buy a Ford Mustang, and I started reading the business books then, was how about I buy some of the Ford stock? Again, I didn't have a lot of money. My first investment in the Ford stock was $2 because that's how much the stock was trading for. Now it's much higher, but what I'm trying to get at is, you can start with a very little amount of money. I mean, nowadays with the new age of stock brokerages, if you have $10, you can start buying this type of equity. You can start building this type of equity. But the key now is the consistency and how often, like doing it all the time. Because when I say consistency, people say, oh, anytime I have $100. Well, okay, what you want to do by consistency is make it automatic. Anytime you get paid, take a portion of that money and automatically invest it. Now, the next question is probably, where do I put this money? Do I just throw it into Tesla or Amazon? Well, if you're not willing to do that level of research where you don't want to try to find the best companies, you don't want to invest in real estate, you don't want to get into the more, let's say the more advanced type of stuff. You want to just put your money to work. Well, the simplest thing you can do is look at something called an ETF, which is an exchange traded fund, which gives you exposure not to one company, but many companies, maybe hundreds of companies. For example, there's something called the S&P 500, which is a group of the 500 biggest companies on the stock market, essentially the 500 biggest companies in America. You can invest in the S&P 500 by investing in just one symbol. So you invest in this one thing and you're getting exposure to 500 different companies. Now you don't have to worry about what each of these 500 companies are doing. You're just investing essentially in America, the future of the American economy. If that's something you believe in, well, now every time you get paid, put in $100. And now you just do this for the long term, whether the market is up or down, does not matter. It should not change your strategy. You just keep passively investing your money, make it automatic, make it passive. That way you don't have to even worry about it. And now you just keep building it up, because now it's the whole idea of compounding. You don't want to just throw your money in at once. You want to put a little bit of money and let that grow, put more money and let that grow, put more money and let that grow. I made a couple of videos where I talked about two people. One was a janitor, one worked in a school. Both of them made very little income, yet both of them retired very wealthy. And the reason, and I'm talking about in the millions of dollars, and the reason why they've been able to retire with $1 million plus was because they took a little bit of money every time they got paid and they just invested that money. It did not matter, what else was going on in the world. They always paid themselves first. They always invested in assets before they started going out and buying things that made them look rich. Every single time. And when you put that little bit of money to work, whether you're starting with $25 or $250 or $1,000, when you put that money to work and you do that consistently over time, you can build real wealth. I mean, if you look at a compound calculator, a few $100s a month compounded from the age of 21 to 65, getting an average rate of return. I mean, we're talking about millions, but it just starts with making that small investment first and being consistent with it and always being willing to learn.
I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the other option, so as I was saying there, is the issue is I don't have enough, it's not going to matter, right? Like that's one mindset. The other mindset is, and it's almost the opposite, it's the idea of like, but I want to make money quick.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like it's like, oh no, but I want it now. And I think there's this mindset, especially what you keep saying about how the lifestyle has been portrayed, that we almost feel like people just change their lives overnight and that they all of a sudden have like a portfolio of rental properties, or they all of a sudden have the nice house or the nice car or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden we're wondering, well, how does it happen that quick for me? And then we get stuck in a get rich quick scheme or we get stuck in like some quick win. It sounds like to me that one of the biggest trainings is in the discipline of being able to postpone pleasure.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying in any market is it's going to take time. Like you had to save up four to 8,000 for your first condo that you bought.
Yeah.
First of all, you had to work for that money. You had to save that money so that you could invest it. Then you were able to buy this 8,000 condo, which obviously has had great, growth, I'm sure. But there was a lot that took to get to that. Whereas I think right now people are like, oh, well, I'd rather spend $100 on this, right?
It's a real decade of sacrifice. And there's really no way around it if you want to fast track your way. Now, the best investment you can make if you want the better returns, the bigger returns, is by investing your money in yourself. And the tough part is you got to be willing to go through that time and the effort, because you're right, it takes time. Unless you have that experience already there, you have the mentors, you have, parents, people who can guide you through it, maybe you can shorten it. But I didn't have that. So for me, it took me a solid decade to figure it out, to go from business idea to business idea to business idea, to go through failure over failure, to get scammed after scam. Those things are what teach you. And when you're going through it, it sucks. You don't realize that you're going through a lesson. You just feel like, dang, I just got screwed over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
True.
But it's you got to keep the goal, in mind. And it's understanding what is more important to you right now. Because you're right. The last thing that you want to do also is get into this idea of just pinching pennies, because at the end of the day, a penny saved is just a penny. And the thing that I can best do to illustrate that is if you make $40,000 a year and you're like, okay, I'm going to put aside a quarter of my income. I'm going to put aside $10,000 to save and invest. And then you start putting your money to work and you're like, oh my God, I love this. I want to do more. I want to get better results. So now you're like, well, I'm going to try to put aside 30% of my income, 35% of my income. And you keep trying to squeeze this limited pie. But this is where now it's about building that growth mindset. And this is what wealthy people are able to do, where they say, okay, sure, I can try to squeeze more pennies out of the pie, but the other thing that I could do is I'm going to try to grow the pie. How do I go from $40,000 to $400,000? And you might hear that thinking, how in the world am I going to go from 40 to 400? Like it just sounds impossible and so far away. And at that point, it might seem the way, but the first step, like you said, it's that mindset. That's why I call minority mindset, because all success starts with your mindset. You have to be wealthy here before you can be wealthy in your bank account. And you have to understand how your mindset plays a part in it. Because now if you tell yourself you can't do it, you can't.
Yeah.
But if you tell yourself you can, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to say, how do I go from 40 to 50? 50 to 100. You're going to start watching YouTube videos. You're going to start putting in work. And as you start to make more money, now you're going to be able to answer that question of, what do I want to do with this money? Do I want to go out and buy a new Beamer? Or do I want to go out and invest in my business? Do I want to go out and buy a rental property? Do I want to go out and invest in stocks? Do I want to go out and invest in a startup? And now you can make these decisions because you have that financial education. And this is why, anytime I talk about the hows of, things that I say you should do to become wealthy, I always talk about how you invest and grow your money last. Because if you don't know how to save that money, if you don't know how to invest that money, earning more money doesn't do you any good until you know how to do that. Because now earning more money has the most impact, because now you know how to put that money to work. You have the system. And I'll give you a quick example. Like the first time I made $1 million in a year, my car was worth $500 that I was driving. I still drive today that $500 car. Just last week, before I came out here to California, my homeowner association called me and they said, hey, Jaspreet, we have a number of complaints about a junk car sitting in your driveway. And this is a true story. They said it's been sitting there, because I was in California for a long time. They said it's been sitting there, and people say that you should take these junk cars and put them in storage. And I was like, well, for your information, it's not a junk car. That is my car that I take to and from work every single day. It doesn't have a bumper on it, but it works. And they were like, well, you have to put it higher or further in the driveway so people don't see it. And I was just like, oh my God, you don't get it. And it's not that I can't go out and buy another car. The way I look at it is, well, if I want to go out and buy a $150,000 car, which I can go out and take this cash and buy a car, or I can take this $150,000 and put it back either into real estate or into stocks or into my business, because that's something that I've been investing heavily in now. I started a company called Market Briefs, which is a financial newsletter company, and we're trying to grow aggressively because I want to make financial news more accessible. Because this is something like I look at the things that were very hard for me to understand. Like CNBC used to be something I used to like watching, right. But it was just so complex. None of the things made sense. There's just so many things happening. And so now you might watch and say, I want to be better with my money. And so now you start watching the financial news because where do you go next? And then all of a sudden you get hit with all these complex terms and things that don't make any sense. And you turn it off. And so I created Market Briefs as a way to make financial news more accessible and easy to understand. And 2022 was the real first year that we became Market Briefs, an actual company. So I'm like, well, I can take this cash and go out and buy a car, or I can hire more employees. We can buy better software. We can buy better infrastructure. My employees have a better car than I do, but I'm focused on, that long term. I want to build this into something bigger. I want to make it something better. Now I'm going to buy a nice car one day. I'm going to buy a better car. I'm not saying that I won't, but it's that level of, how much are you willing to sacrifice today for something bigger tomorrow? I am not driven by materialistic things. I don't really care about name brand stuff. It doesn't really bother me. I mean, I think it's cool if you like it, but it's just not for me. I buy a lot of my clothes, my suits from India. I get them made for $100. I get them custom made. A lot of my clothes are relatively inexpensive. But for me, it's I enjoy what I do, and I'm driven more by the purpose of I want to help people with the things that I wish I would have had help with. Because the more and more that I have seen growth, the more and more that I talk to people, I keep hearing, I wish I would have learned this sooner. I wish I would have learned this younger.
Yeah.
And that's where, Minority Mindset, I'm trying to help provide that financial education with my channel and the Market Brief, trying to make that news more accessible for anybody who wants to be aware of what's happening in the real estate market, the stock market, the crypto market, inflation, without being overwhelmed with that sensationalism and the craziness of what happens in the traditional financial news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you said that ultimately the best investment is an investment in yourself, which, we've heard time and time again, but what you're ultimately saying, and that